That was a pretty good take.
Just one moment, please.
There's no sound. Oh,
Apology. Can you hear it?
no.
I think it sounds pretty good.
Okay, sorry. Just one moment.
I'll just read it. Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks, although that is not required. I just finished my ethics training again yesterday. Is that the end of it? Or is there another?
Still going.
Oh, you can't advance the. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when finished speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time.
Almost there, sorry.
It's okay. Hey, we've learned to adapt. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. I think I know the last part. Thank you for participating in this meeting. Oh, all written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell.
Thank you. And with that, would you, Jackie, please conduct the roll call?
Okay, yes. Chair Mitchell?
Here.
Vice Chair Geringer?
Here.
Committee Member Burgess?
Burgess, I'm here.
Burgess, thank you. Committee Member Haskew?
Here.
Committee Member Howell?
Here.
Committee Member Hudson?
Here.
Committee Member Hirsch? Committee Member Hirsch? Committee Member Kamara?
Here.
Thank you. Committee Member Craig?
Here.
Committee Member Levin? Committee Member Levin? Committee Member McCrary?
Here.
Committee Member McFadden? Committee Member McWee?
Here.
Committee Member Toth?
Here.
Thank you. Committee Member Xavier?
Here.
Thank you. Committee Member Braxton?
Here.
Thank you. Okay, we have all committee members present except for Committee Member Hirsch, Committee Member Levin, and Committee Member McFadden.
Thank you. And welcome again. And I want to welcome Ms. Braxton. Thank you for agreeing to serve on our task force. We look forward to your active participation. And I see Ms. Toth is shaking her hands, clapping her hands. There we go. All right. We will now move on to public comment. Jackie, have we received any written public comment?
We have not received any written public comment.
Is there anyone in the queue who wishes to address us on any non-agenda items? Are you seeing any hands raised?
I do not see any hands raised.
All righty, then we will move on to item number 3, which is approval of the summary of our actions at our meeting on October 21st, 2021. Do community members have any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Move consent, Hudson.
Thank you. Moved by Hudson. Is there a second?
Second, Geringer.
Second, Geringer. Do we have any public comment on this item, Jackie?
We do not have any public comment on this.
Fine. Would you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
And
Chair-
I'm going to be real. I want us to move along. You don't have to put our titles. I would just appreciate it if you use last names. I don't think anybody
Sure.
will be offended.
No problem. Okay, Mitchoff,
Yes.
Garriger,
Aye. I mean, yes, aye.
Borges. I'm sorry.
Burgess.
Burgess.
Um,
Okay. I will get that. I'm
Burgie,
sorry.
Bourgeois, whatever. No, but I wasn't there, so do I need to recuse myself?
You know,
No.
if you read them, you can approve them.
Yes.
Okay, Haskew,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Hudson,
Mayor Hudson. Oh, yes.
Oh, stop it.
Hirsch. Okay, absent. Craig,
Yes.
Kamara,
Yes.
Levin, McCrary,
Yes.
McFadden, McWee,
Yes.
Toth,
Yes.
Xavier,
Aye.
Braxton.
Abstain, I wasn't.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so motion passes unanimously with Braxton abstaining and committee members Hirsch, Levin, and McFadden absent.
Thank you. We already saved so much time on my programmed agenda here just by getting rid of all those titles. All right. Moving on to item 4A, which is an update on Measure X funding, and staff person John Cunningham will lead off our discussion. Hi, John.
Hello, Chair Mitchoff, members of the task force. Yeah, I'll jump right in. Just this past Tuesday, the Board of Supervisors had a Measure X item that, among other actions, adopted an expenditure plan. As a reminder, we talked about this at our last meeting. Measure X is the half-cent sales tax that was passed in 2020. In summary, the funding from that measure is intended to support vulnerable communities. There's more details that I'll leave out right now. CCTA and county staff submitted a proposal to fund ATS plan implementation. The slide that was presented at the Board of Supervisors and that was presented to the Measure X Advisory Committee before that is in your packet, and that proposal was approved without modifications. The proposal came directly out of the recently adopted Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan, and it's meant to balance two activities. We have sort of a couple of slower, more methodical capacity building efforts, which are what you see on the bullets, the establishment of a coordinating entity and a one-call, one-click system. The other activities are meant to get relief out to the population in a much more immediate fashion. And those two bullets you see in the packet are user-side subsidies and the one-seat ride program. And that's all I have to report right now. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And if you can take down your screen. Yes, we're very excited about this. You all should be doing a little happy dance with your feet under your desks. Yes, there we go. The meeting was quite interesting. This was not a controversial item, and we didn't even have to. I do think we had one speaker on the item, but Supervisor Burgess and I were part of the unanimous approval of that. So with that, are there any comments or questions by committee members? Okay, and Jackie, any written correspondence or any hands up?
No written correspondence or hands up that I am seeing.
Great. That was an informational item. So we will now move on to 4B, which is the orientation on accessible transportation terms and concepts. And Richard Weiner, is it Weiner or Weiner?
A Weiner, actually.
Weiner. Okay.
Yeah.
Scott Weiner, Richard Weiner. I'll remember that.
I know it gets confusing. Great. Thanks very much, Madam Chair. So we thought it would be helpful for everybody to sort of be on the same page in terms of our understanding of some of the key concepts that are going to be discussed. A glossary of terms has been prepared, and I believe it will be sent to you, if not before this meeting, then it will be after this meeting. But we selected a handful for me to just give you some idea of what we have in mind when we talk about these terms. Some of them are totally obvious to everybody who's on this call, and others may be less obvious. So let me just jump right in here. ADA mandated paratransit service. I think everybody knows what we're talking about is demand response service, curb to curb with door to door upon request. It's advanced reservation service, so it's not responsive to people's immediate needs for transportation. There's so much to be said about this. I'd be happy to answer any questions afterwards on what we mean by ADA paratransit. Human service transportation is a very broad brush, and what we're talking about over here is transportation that's provided by human social service agencies, generally speaking to people with disabilities, older adults, and low-income populations. It can be demand response service. It can be shuttle services. Can be services just to the agencies themselves, could be bus, transit bus passes, taxi vouchers, etc. It's a very broad brush, but the important distinction is that in contrast to ADA paratransit service, human service transportation is not subject to the same requirements, which is both a plus and a minus. It allows for a lot more flexibility, but it doesn't actually need to meet certain very high standards that the ADA does require. Mobility management, and this is an important one for our work here today and over the next few months, because what we're talking about is a mobility management function, mobility center, if you will. This has become increasingly common around the country. At the end of the day, what we're really talking about is matching people to the transportation mode that best meets their needs, both in terms of their abilities, functional abilities, could be physical, cognitive, etc., and also in terms of their geographic or temporal needs, if you will. Can be a whole host of programs that are included under the umbrella of mobility management. Could be grant writing, could be travel training, could be one call, one click type services. Again, it's a very broadly used umbrella term. Transportation network companies, most people think of Lyft and Uber when thinking about this, but it's really ride-sharing companies in which people use an app in order to call a personal vehicle or a driver who uses their personal vehicle to get you to your destination. And the reason we bring it up over here is because increasingly around the country, agencies are looking towards TNCs to fill some of the gaps that are not as readily met with other transportation modes. The final one is microtransit, which may be less familiar to people in this call. But again, this is a concept. Actually, we used to call this point deviation when I started working in this field 20, 30 years ago. But essentially what we're talking about is it's a form of transportation that serves areas that are not easily served by fixed route transit. Because they're low density or because of the street configurations, it's difficult to be productive enough to justify fixed route service in those areas. So generally speaking, this is demand response. People call for the service, and there are many more stops in an area than there would be regular bus stops. The vehicle, which is generally smaller than a fixed route vehicle, circulates throughout the area, picking up people based on the requests that come in. You can have certain designated stops where the vehicle will stop at scheduled times. But generally speaking, it's much more flexible than fixed route, and they don't follow a particular schedule or a particular route. So it's somewhere of a hybrid between fixed route service and straight up paratransit service. And we can talk about that more. Yeah, I think those are the key points that I wanted to hit with those, but I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of those modes.
Thank you, Richard. Do any of you have any questions or comments for Richard on this? Okay, we're also, well informed. Herb, are you raising your hand or you're just fixing your screen?
I'm just fixing the screen.
Okay, I'm glad because I can see the beer behind you, and I'll be having one of those a little later on.
Oh, that's my home away from home when it comes to baseball.
It looks like a Oakland A's kind of thing. All right.
Karen, you have another meeting at 5.
I know, and that, believe me, I'm getting ready for it. But thank you for the reminder. Jackie, any written comments or questions from the public on this?
I did not receive any public comment for this.
Okay, so this was also an informational item. We are now going to move into a presentation on the one-seat ride pilot, and Rashida Kamara. Am I saying that, Rashida, correctly? There she is.
Kamara, that's correct.
Kamara. All right. Welcome. Please go ahead and begin the show, please.
Sure. So, as many of you know, one-seat ride is basically a passenger, normally a paratransit passenger, that's trying to travel from one jurisdictional area to another jurisdictional area using a regional transfer trip. In the past, that individual will actually book a regional transfer trip with their home agency, and that'll be coordinated with the other agency. When COVID started, it gave us an opportunity to basically fix this problem. In fact, this has been an albatross around my transportation professional life for 27 years. And so the opportunity to use something like COVID to fix a problem like this, even in a pilot phase, was very welcoming actually to myself and to all the agencies, but most importantly to the passengers that we serve. That's a little background. So the next slide, please. So more on some transfer trips. Because the two transit agencies have to coordinate, they have what is called a meet location. A lot of times the meet location is a BART station. So we have what are called dwell times. Because they're two drivers that are meeting from two separate agencies, they get to that location. One driver with the passenger may get there and then has to wait or dwell. And then another passenger, I'm sorry, the past slide. I just wanted to explain for those that might not understand what goes into traditional transfer trip before we actually get to this, so that I explain what dwell time actually means. So they have to dwell and wait. And a lot of times they're waiting with a passenger that maybe has to go someplace else and is not necessarily on this regional transfer trip and waiting. So because we're working with 2 or 3 different partners, the dwell times are 2 or 3 times longer. Because we're working with 2 or 3 different partners, it takes agency times to book it. They have to actually call and speak to reservation agents. There's time to coordinate. Most of the different transit agencies, they all have, most of them have different reservations booking times. For somebody who's a traditional paratransit rider, most paratransit rides, you have to book maybe 24 hours in advance. But when you're coordinating something this complicated, a lot of transfer agencies have either 48 hours or 3 days in order to plan this trip. Then there's driver wait times, also considered dwell times. And there's also a ripple effect on the schedule. I mentioned earlier about that passenger who has nothing to do with this transfer trip and they're running late to their ride. And so there's a ripple effect to the schedules. And then there's passenger safety and satisfaction. You know, if the passenger says, you know what, I can't wait for the other driver to come, can you please let me off the bus? Well, that passenger is in our care. You can't keep them hostage, but at the same time, you also haven't really completed the trip. So there's a safety aspect that a lot of operators worry about. And then of course, with COVID, there was contact tracing. Because of all the things that I described earlier, traditional transfer trips, customer satisfaction was, well, non-existent really. Next slide, please. So before one seat, here's some data with the 12 months pre-COVID, November 18 to October 2019. The information that I'm showing right now has to do with more like participating partners. So I'm talking about, you know, Tri-Delta, I'm talking about County Connection, I'm talking about WestCat, LAFTA, and we have a few tester trips with East Bay Paratransit, but the bulk of this 99% of the data that I'm presenting is with the participating agencies in Contra Costa County. So about 14,000 transfer trips, no-shows were about 2%, cancellations about 20%, OTP, meaning on-time performance, as you can see, wasn't very well. And then we're talking about a dwell time or a wait time of 9 to 8 minutes. 12 months partial COVID, as we starting to get into 20, just a couple of months into COVID, we dropped 8.6 thousand transfer trips. No-shows were 5%. As you can see, there are a couple of months of COVID in here. So you can see why no-shows went up a little bit. Cancellations, of course, went up. OTP there was an improvement. And with on-time performance going up, there was a false sense of improvement. Well, frankly, the driver was on time because he didn't have other passengers to pick up. And believe me, when I say it was a false sense of improvement, people started to think, oh, the problem is going away. The problem did not go away. It was just hidden under a virus. Average dwell time, of course, 7.2. That also went down because of the points that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So we use the contact tracing as an opportunity, the limitation of contact tracing as an opportunity to jumpstart the one seat. As you know, many of the agencies were only transporting one passenger at a time. When we started thinking about the way the virus was spreading, the traditional way, the passengers interacting with two drivers. Well, instead of two drivers, why doesn't the passengers interact with just one driver? So we had interagencies agreements with, as I mentioned, the participating partners earlier. There was a lot of heavy lifting that was done in a short period of time. Some of us use the same scheduling software, some of us don't, but we had to get basically maps and put them onto our scheduling software because we had to have an idea of what the service area was for each of the different agencies. We had to think about policy updates. We had to talk about fare structures. We also had to talk about booking policies. As I said earlier, a lot of the different agencies have different booking policies. So, you know, if we're going to streamline the process, let's go for the gusto. So instead of 2 days, 3 days, you know what? Let's make it like a standard reservation ride. They're already familiar with the reservation. They call 24 hours in advance, 8 to 5 the day before. Let's make this the same thing. The transit agencies have different cancellation policies. I won't talk about mine as being revised right now. So let's pretend as if we're not talking about that. So we brought it down to 1 hour and we gave out one phone number. We partnered with the agencies. We said, if somebody calls you wanting to book a transfer trip, you know, give them this phone number and say, if you're booking a transfer trip, call this number. The reason why this was significant, because somebody could potentially be dealing with 2 or 3 different agencies when they're dealing with a transfer trip. But with this one phone number, if they're they're going across these different agencies, they're only going to call one phone number. And so we were making it a lot easier for the passenger, making it user-friendly. Next slide, please. So this was going to provide more efficient transfer trips because we wanted to eliminate the word transfer. So there was the elimination of touch points and wait times from potentially 4 reservation agents to just one person that you're talking to. When I say 4 drivers, I'm talking about a standard round trip with just one partner. And then also the agencies will share the cost based on the time spent in each service area. And of course, choosing a low-cost vendor. There was an opportunity to choose a couple of other vendors to do this, but County Connection was in a unique position where we were just going out. We had gone out for an RFP barely 2 years prior. And in the process, we didn't know COVID was going to hit. But one of the things that I knew that I wanted to tackle, and County Connection knew that they wanted to collaborate with these partners to tackle, was one seat. We knew going in that we needed a partner that was going to help us to do this. And so our partner was willing to do it. And then COVID just provided the perfect opportunity for our transportation partner and our contractor to help us to do this. Next slide, please. So after one seat, November, here are some rough numbers. Total transfer trips, obviously not 14,000 like pre-COVID, but as you can see, it's steadily going up. No-shows as 3%. Cancellation, if you remember earlier, I'll do a test. Who remembers 21%? Down to 12%. Why? Because they don't have to transfer. I really strongly believe that if they sit down and they think of their day and that it's not going to take them 5 or 6 hours to get from one location to another because of that potential transfer, they're like, I'll take the trip. It's worth me taking the trip. And of course, on-time performance, a combination of COVID on-time performance plus the ability of a driver to go directly and not wait for somebody else. Average dwell time, 44% decrease. They don't have to wait. Next slide, please. So here are some of the challenges. Just to let you know, my board just approved a 1-year extension with this. We do have some things that we need to work out before asking for this to be a permanent program and a part of what we do. It should be a part of our life. It should be what we provide. We should do it with our eyes closed. But it is a non-ADA mandated service. So, you know, this is the perfect venue to talk about this because we know that ADA is there, but we also know about all of these gaps in services. So how do we build from that? There is some unknown expense, and that's another reason why we are extending this for another year to see how we can, you know, equitably, you know, share the expense associated with this. We know that there's a way to make this a little bit, it's expensive, but there are other ways that we can look at this and share the cost to make this happen. Deadhead cost. Long trips like San Francisco and Stanford, besides Contra Costa County, we do have individuals that now do a 1-seat ride up to Orinda and then have to do a transfer trip with East Bay in order to go to San Francisco and Stanford. What are we going to do if we want to expand this so that the person can receive a 1-seat ride throughout where they want to travel to? And then, of course, matching agency performance criteria. Agencies are very proud about their performance criteria. They set these performance criteria in RFPs. They're transit agencies that fight really hard to meet these performance criteria because this is what the passenger expects. So we have to be able to streamline this. And as all of you know, ongoing funding to make this happen. Keeping a low-cost vendor and low productivity with social distancing protocols. You know, this is a big deal. We're not using an Uber to do this trip. We're using a vehicle that is basically designed to pick up more than one person. So even though COVID provided the perfect opportunity to do this, how do we sustain this? You know, how do we get more people on? Because the truth of the matter is that after individuals are used to just being the only person in the vehicle, they're kind of okay with maybe one more, but will they be okay with 3, 4, 5, 7 other individuals in the vehicle and us still be able to provide this service? Next slide, please. So the COVID cost structure, the actual trip duration versus full trip cost, these are some of the things that, you know, we're going to be looking at this next year. All of the agency costs for trips within the polygons. So far, we've spent roughly about $82,000. unreimbursed costs and deadhead costs that County Connection has taken on as part of the pilot is approximately $40,000, $49,000. And so all of this will also be looked at with this next year with the pilot. Next slide, please. These are the share of the trips so far, divided up among the participating agencies. The idea that the reason why this works so well is because most of these individuals were basically either connecting with us in the middle at 42%, at 49%, coming all the way from the Antioch service area into the other service area. And so as you can see, the bulk of the connectors belong to County Connection and Tri-Delta. Next slide, please. So this is the beauty behind what we do. I actually interviewed this passenger myself. A lot of these individuals, I called them myself, and then staff also called. So we actually spoke to real live one-seat users, not only one-seat users, but individuals that have been using the service pre-COVID and during COVID during one-seat. The one-seat pilot, paraphrase, has given me back my life. I feel secure and safe. It's like putting my key in the ignition and starting my own car. Arvid says the best experience I have been with County Connection Link and the one-seat program. He talks about how well-trained the drivers are and how friendly they are and how he's arriving on time to his appointments. Next slide, please. I'm pleased with the one-seat program. I'd love to continue using it because it eliminates communication problems. I could really go in depth, but I was only given 20 minutes because I used to be on the operations side. When it comes to communication problem, I didn't even spend enough time on this presentation talking about communication problems, but I always arrive on time to my appointments using one seat. I'll stop there. Vandiar speaks about the one seat cutting my trip time from 3 hours to 1 hour. Think about, we're all on Zoom, but think about if you have an extra 2 hours of your day and what that means to you and your family. And then of course, Monisha, the drivers do an excellent job. My state of health is frail. And after dialysis treatment, coming home sooner, if she was using a traditional transfer, she can begin to rest and take my medication on time in order to recover. She needs this to live. Next slide, please. So the next steps, some of the folks that are interested in what we're doing, MTC Transformation Action Plan. We need to look at the post-pandemic cost structure. What can we do about reducing the rate per trip? And then we have some decisions to make. The extension of the pilot, I just mentioned about our board approval, conversion of it to a permanent program. Some of the things that came up at the very beginning, premium fare, we quickly knocked that down because we can't solve a problem and then make it too expensive to actually implement the solution to the problem. Rider's choice, fees for no-shows and cancellations, definitely some decisions we need to make. Next slide. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Rashida. How exciting. And I'm not in the business, so this is very exciting. Those of you who are, I'm sure you're excited. Okay. I saw Dave Hanson raise his hand first, so go ahead, and then Debbie, and then Herb, and then others.
Rashida, we extended this for a year this morning.
Correct.
And I believe one of the questions you're asking is for others to extend. But is there anyone really that doesn't understand that this program has to be converted to full-time? The actual makeup of it, I get it. There's things that can be changed or tweaked or whatever. But are we working toward getting someone in the legislature to write the bill to make one seat permanent? And that's the question I think we should be pursuing much sooner than later, like right now.
Thank you, Dave. Debbie, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Mitchoff.
Karen, first names.
I thought we were last names. I was feeling
That's when we take roll call.
What up, Mitchoff?
Supervisor
All right. So
Mitchoff.
anyway, I thank you, Rashida, for one, keeping it real, because I think that there's a tendency to just show numbers and not explain what's underneath those numbers. And that false sense of improvement is really important to highlight the why that's happening. And I just appreciate your forthrightness, shall I say. The comment that was made by your writer, that it felt like I had my own keys and my own ignition, like that concept is what accessible transportation should be for everybody riding it. I just want to ask everybody what it would be like for you. I live in Fairfield. I've worked in Contra Costa County for the last 20 years of my life. And if I had to get out of my car and wait for somebody else to bring me a different car in Vallejo, and then I crossed the bridge, and then I had to wait for somebody else to give me a different car in Martinez, and then I finished my trip to get to my job at Pleasant Hill, I'd be a pretty tired person by the time I got to work. This is impossible the way that it's set up now. So we can figure out the finances, and what Dave said, great. Let's get some legislation in place. Let's make sure that it's not just policy, but it also has budget attached to it. But that should be our starting point, is that people should be able to get where they need to go without waiting for other people, hopping on other rides, sharing it with 15 other people, each and every stop. So what happens when you transfer is now you're sharing with 10 other people a ride, and then you transfer and you're sharing with 10 or 12 or 14 other people. There are a lot of complexities that go into that too. There are crowbar trips that they just pop up in the middle of your trip and you get diverted somewhere. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens. So this should be the bar. My concern, and Rashida, I have said this to you, why is East Bay Paratransit not at the table right now? How many people lost Doctors Hospital, lost their services in West County? We are already living in a racist systemic issue, right? But when we impact West County the hardest and don't have opportunities for those folks to get to from their medical appointments, which they're now going to in Alameda County, this is a travesty. And I have concerns around that. And I think that when we look at all of these opportunities, we don't just look at it from ageism and ableism, but also racism. All of these things play into this transportation system. So I want to elevate that.
You need to wrap up on your 3 minutes.
Oh, I only get 3 minutes?
Well, I'm trying so everybody can speak. I mean, go ahead. I'm trying to be a good steward of everyone's time.
I think listening to me complain is a very good exercise in everyone's time usefulness. So I just wanted to also say, when you're talking about non-ADA paratransit, that we're recognizing as a group, as we move into this discussion of accessible transportation, that we're not thinking about things in terms of this is paratransit or this is not paratransit. This is a continuum of services and supports that we are putting together so that everybody can get from point A to point B. So it's important for us to not just focus on what is ADA and what is not ADA, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Herb?
Okay, well, she did all the talking for me, but I'm going to give you the example from, I've actually used it, and I did do it from Livermore. I actually rode to Lafayette, and I said, this was the funnest ride in the life. Because 22 years as the regional center East Bay advocate, all I hear is it's nowhere. And I've used paratransit all my life. And I have a horror story of going to Livermore. I live in Dublin. I was trying to get to Livermore, and I went around the house. I went around my own house 4 times because the East Bay Paratransit bus was dropping off a passenger going to Livermore, and he was gonna get on my bus. And I missed my appointment. Having this would have allowed me to do what I wanted. My girlfriend, she lives in Lafayette. I was able to go to a meeting in Livermore, and then they came, and County Connection sent a bus all the way to Livermore and drove me to Lafayette and back to Dublin. I don't know why this has never been done. I've been asking for this kind of system for 25, 30 years. And it's outrageous that nobody's ever done this. And
well, now we are.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just saying, and what we need to do is to go to the state legislators. I know it's like ADA, they're going to say that, but come on, guys. We need to go to the legislators and say, we need to put this in a funding program to make it a permanent thing. And that's where I'm already ready to ride over there with you. Whoever wants to pick me up, I will go to Sacramento with. Just give me a day you want to go.
Thank you, Herb. Myrtle, go ahead, please.
I have a question because I'm not too familiar with all of the programs, so I'm trying to find out what's going on. When I looked at the map that was presented, looked like this program is only in East County, and West County is part of Contra Costa County. And I was wondering if is there going to be any kind of program to coordinate the transportation system in West County? It's terrible. I was listening to, I think it was Debbie that was mentioning how many different transit systems that she had to use to get from one place to the other. I had one of our Commission on Aging members mention the fact that she had to leave Richmond and the transportation from Richmond to El Cerrito to get what she needed to do to get to Martinez. And of course, you know, Richmond is closer to Martinez than El Cerrito. So it just, you know, you go away from where you need to go to get back to where you need to go and pay a fare on each one of these systems. So that was I'm just curious as to whether or not this one ride system is going to be also presented in West County.
Myrtle, and I'm going to ask, I'm keeping track of these questions, and then I'm going to give an opportunity for Rashida to respond, because I think with the comments, and I have a question too. So if you will hold on to that, we'll go to Jeannie. Is there any, I don't see any other hands raised besides Jeannie. Is it Jean or Jeannie?
I go by Jeannie.
Jeannie. Okay, good. Go ahead, Jeannie. Oh, and then John's hands up. Okay, go ahead.
I share some of the comments that have been made. It's been very frustrating I've been trying to get this program going for 20 years, and shout out to Rashida for finally making it happen. All these years, I feel like I've been talking to a brick wall, and Rashida comes along and makes it happen. So I sincerely thank her for waving her magic wand and making it happen. There's a lot more to do. Tri-Delta Transit is thrilled to be a part of the program. As you can see from the statistics, there's a lot of transportation between Central County and East County, and we're delighted to provide that. As far as the extension of the program, it will be on our next meeting, the next board meeting's agenda, which will be on December 15th. And I anticipate that we will be extending it for a year, and look forward to expanding the program to some of the areas that we've been talking about. Herb, I'm with you. I've been wanting to do this for not as long as you have, but probably 20 years. I've been working on this. So Rashida, good for you for finally making it happen, getting the right people in the right place. So we're looking forward to making it better.
Collaborative efforts.
Yeah.
Collaborative effort.
Thank you, Jean.
My last comment is, why isn't East Bay Paratransit on board?
Well, we're going to get to that. I'm keeping track.
They need to do it. That's
okay. Well, and I have a feeling that Rashida has an answer for that. I have an assumption about what the answer is. We'll get there. John, can I let Luella go first and then come to you as staff? Luella, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I feel like I've fallen into an area that everybody else in the room knows a lot more about than I do. So I'm going to ask a couple of basic. First of all, Rashida, I am going to congratulate you. That was a potload of information that just seeing that information made me infinitely smarter than I was when I volunteered for this. I understand the need, but I don't understand everything there is to know. My question is, first, is there any kind of qualifications for the people who can take use of this service? And I can't remember the second question, but what is basically the population that this is going to serve?
Okay. Then John, go ahead, and then I'm going to come back and round up some stuff with Rashida. Go ahead, John.
Great. Thank you, Chair Matoff. Yeah, I also want to thank Ms. Kamara for the presentation and for a complete view of the program. I've seen her presented at several different meetings, and this was by far the best. As I said, she did present both the upsides and downsides. And in contrast to all the comments that we've just heard, I do want to push back a little bit and just say that this program is not a silver bullet. And it was not presented as a silver bullet, but some of the reactions that I've seen are treating it as one. You saw some of the downsides in the presentation that you saw. And I want to be clear that this system, this program, it's a workaround, and it is a workaround for all the service silos that we maintain in Contra Costa County in the Bay Area. And I have numerous concerns. One is the deadhead costs that you saw in the presentation. And this is a significant issue because one of the most common complaints about this service area is the cost. And this program is very likely to decrease the cost effectiveness of paratransit programs. And so that's, I just wanted to pump the brakes a little bit on this. It does solve problems in the short term. Absolutely, no question about it. And we do need to implement it. That's why we presented it to the Board of Supervisors for immediate funding. But I want to keep clear eyes on this program and keep looking at, which is why we have the pilot program funded and why I'm sure it was extended by the transit operator. So thank you. That concludes my comments.
Thank you. So Rashida, I think the simple question to answer first is, who is the population this serves?
We're currently serving ADA eligible riders that belong to the participating transit agencies.
When you say belong, they live in those special districts, or they've already been served by them?
They're certified and potentially live in those districts.
Okay, so
and I do have some participating members on here. So if there's anything that they want to jump in and add or help me to answer,
well,
this is a team. This is not the Rashida show. It's a one seat with participating agency show.
Herb, I'm going to ask you to be patient for a minute. Okay, So Rashida, you mentioned it's a pilot. Would I be correct in my assumption, and maybe this answers some of the questions that, because I saw Westcat was at the table, but they didn't participate as much. So is that a function of needing of them not advertising this much, or did we not get as many people calling in? Because I heard you say that they would call into the agency. So can you sort of address that question? Because I don't want people leaving this meeting thinking that West County is arbitrarily being left out. I want to hear, I have a feeling there are some issues and or reasons why those numbers are down.
So historically speaking, Westcat just hasn't necessarily had a large part of the pie when it came to transfer trips. The marriage in this has really been between, County Connection and East County, which is Tri-Delta. And then the other big player in this would be East Bay Paratransit. If the pie were different because there was 100% participation with them involved, you realize that we have a married couple and a mistress. It's that type of relationship. So no, I don't necessarily think we haven't dissected it. We haven't given it that other level, to really explain the 4%, but we do know that historically they've played a smaller part of the total transfer trips to begin with. So it's not a surprise and Rob just joined us. He might be able to answer the tail end of that. So generically, I would say they were a smaller portion of the pie historically.
Okay, so I want to extend that then. I've heard Debbie mention it, and the concept of East Bay Transit or paratransit. Were they not included for a reason, or did they decline to participate?
So historically speaking, when I started off and I say that I've been wanting to do this for 25 years, it was because of my personal operational experience, because I worked for East Bay Paratransit for almost 20 years. And I've had the sleepless night with the transfer trip. So I guarantee you they were definitely invited to participate. But they do have their reasons. I do believe that they are interested. We have given them some data. We even did a handful of tester trips. Because you know what? I don't think you know the taste of the pie till you try it. So, that's the whole idea of this pilot, this pilot program. So we did some trips for them. And so we are awaiting how they feel about the trips and, whether or not they're going to hear about the 1 year extension. So we're still waiting to hear from them regarding how they want to move forward or how soon they want to move forward.
Okay, so we're going to do a next steps, but could John and Peter have the parking lot issues? And one of them is, how do we or who should reach out to really encourage East Bay Paratransit to get involved? We've all been in, I think, in that situation where we'll let somebody else try it out first. And then, that's what BART to San Mateo was all about. We all got to pay for it and they got the benefit of all of it and just had to pay for the extension. So again, not casting aspersions. I don't even know East Bay Paratransit individuals or people who work there. It's just an observation from an outsider. So let's put that on how we move forward in that regard. Dave, I know you were talking about legislation and Herb mentioned it. I need information, or can you want the state to put this in as a program so that there's state funding? And that's a great idea, but I have a feeling our state legislators are going to want to see the results of this entire pilot program. You're right, it should be throughout the state, but we've all been around the block with our legislators. And even though I read in the paper this morning about these billions of dollars that are in surplus, I think we have to take something to them that works and show them the efficacy and how it reduces costs in a whole bunch of other ways. So I'm not sure that I think that we're ready to go to the legislature, other than I can talk to my lobbyists, you all can talk to your lobbyists to put this on as a issue that will be coming up in the future. Are people, let me know, shake of head, no, yes, Karen, we agree. If that makes sense, it's something we want to pursue, but I'm not sure it's the highest priority. We want to get some stuff up and running because there may be other things that we want the legislature to fund, and maybe we're able to take 3 ideas to them. Debbie, your hand was up. Go ahead.
I will just say yes, absolutely. There are other ideas. As John pointed out, this is putting a Band-Aid on a problem that is an entire body problem. So there are going to be multiple things that we need to do. And there is legislation that the California Senior Legislature has been working on. They're shopping it with the legislature right now. And yes, Karen, it's going to be much, much broader. But I think what we're doing in Contra Costa County can serve as a roadmap for other counties and communities that are going to get
absolutely. Well, and I'm hoping that with this money that's now available through Measure X, as each of these transit agencies extends their contract, I'm not looking for full funding, but, to help you to make it as best as we can as that pilot. So we'll talk about that in next steps too. John, you started to raise your hand and then put it down. Did you have anything more you wanted to add?
I guess I did want to jump in on the legislation piece. That would be welcome. I would even welcome it even more if both the California Transit Association and CalAct added to their legislative platform, along with one seat ride funding, just a general increase in funding for this population. That is not in their existing legislative platforms right now. Generically, yes, they are seeking more funding, but despite the significant increase in this population, there is no specific policy in their platform to increase the funding for elderly and disabled. We have approached them in the past about this, and they're there just wasn't any interest because the transit agencies, as Rick Ramasir has pointed out very accurately in the past, they have limited bandwidth. The transit industry is asked to do so many things that they just can't focus on everything, 100% full gas on everything. And so, yeah, again, in short, I would welcome something in their platform to fund the one seat program, as well as additional specific funding for elderly and disabled. That would be a very welcome change to their legislative activities.
So I think Diane and I would like to ask you to draft a letter to those two organizations, letting them know we're not looking for them to do the big lift at this time, but to at least add it to their legislative platform, so that when the time comes and we need their support, they're already ready to rock and roll. Diane, would you agree? She is chair of our legislation. Are you chair of legislate? I don't know. We're both on ledge.
And in another couple weeks, it'll switch. So one of us will be chair whenever. Yes, absolutely agree. And I think we're in a position to be the laboratory that this could be something that could go statewide. So I think we are ahead of the curve, and I think we can show that we're worth investing in. And we've got a lot of folks like Debbie, who's working on the state level, that will also help us. So yes, definitely we need to speak to our lobbyists.
Great. That's and again, I'm going to come back to the East Bay Paratransit as we talk about next steps, but I don't want to get ahead of everybody. So Peter, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out, so I already put on my list actually halfway through the presentation that we need to get a hold of East Bay Paratransit and have a discussion with them. So that's on the list. I also wanted to point out that, and Rashida actually had this in her presentation, that the Blue Ribbon Task Force for the region has an action plan for improving transit and accessible transportation, and the one seat ride, I believe, is on that list for a regional basis. So somebody had mentioned that the pilot being done in Contra Costa County and continues can help show the region how it can be done, and hopefully MTC will get on board with supporting legislation to fund and support one seat ride regionally, because the county's one thing, but to have it regionally, Rashida mentioned trips to San Francisco and Stanford, which are clearly outside of Contra Costa County, is a very important part of this.
Thank you, and great. I appreciate that. And I know our both Supervisor Glover is the Board of Supervisors rep to MTC, and Mayor Amy Worth of Orinda is also on MTC. So we can work through that. We've got a lot of good liaisons, connections, partners. Rita, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to add that, which you've already mentioned, cities like San Pablo, Richmond, and El Cerrito are not covered at this point unless East Bay Paratransit comes on board, plus El Serrano. I'd also like to mention the eligibility, the ADA eligibility for paratransit rides. It does not cover people like me, who I am disabled. I've been declared disabled because of my heart condition, but I can walk. I can walk to a bus stop. Therefore, I'm not eligible to ride East Bay Paratransit. So I think the description or parameters or whatever needs to be increased to cover seniors who do not drive, even though they're mobile.
Thank you. And I get that the reason that the various agencies, when I asked Rashida the qualifying, they limited it on the pilot to ADA because then you could get some reimbursement. But I also saw that you mentioned in your program PowerPoints that you want to expand it, or that non-ADA needs to be included. So I think we would all agree with you, Rita, that there's a population that needs this service and they should be able to access it, whether they meet ADA requirements or not. I think that would be the goal of a permanent program. I'm not sure that it can be included in this next year, but I also want us to do some outreach to WestCat. Rita, do you serve on the WestCat board, or no? You're on you're on the West Plan. Yeah, WECTAC. Thank you. But we may be relying on you and other members of that group to reach out, because if we can't, East Bay Paratransit only right now, they could join because they will take ADA, but this next year, I'm not sure we'll be able to do it, but everybody would agree that we would want this to serve any person in the population, whether they meet ADA requirements or not.
Right.
Debbie?
Thank you. And this may bleed into our next sort of topic area, but Rita hit the nail on the head with what I was referencing earlier in terms of us as a body. We are looking at implementing an accessible strategic plan that's not just for X population that qualifies for ADA paratransit. It's for people with disabilities and seniors who have trouble getting from point A to point B. They're not driving a single car like the rest of us are. So it is vital that we have these conversations. For this particular pilot, it's an ADA pilot. I get that. I totally get that. But to Rita's point, we need to be thinking about Silver Ride for her, or an Uber voucher for her to use other points in the system that are less costly than paratransit, but can get her there. And we want to be able, when somebody like Rita, who gives up her car keys in, what was it, 1982, whatever it was, we want that to be, okay, when the DMV says this person's given up their car keys, these are the 10 different options for you, or this is the single number you can call and find out the 15 different services that are available in our community. Like, we need to be just thinking in those terms and not just on the broken part of the paratransit system, although that absolutely needs to be part of this and lifted and all interwoven together. But I just keep wanting to reground us in.
I think we all agree, and we won't lose that. It's what we want. Herb, I'm going to let Bill Pelcher go first because he hasn't spoken yet, and then we'll.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Bill. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Mitchoff. I think one thing that's been hinted at in this call, I just want to just get said, is, and I'm sure everybody knows this, but we're at the very beginning of an expanding demographic of seniors and people with disabilities. The number from the CDC, 1 in 4 adults in the country have some form of disability. Within the 1 in 4, 2 in 5 are seniors, which makes seniors the largest age group within the disability community. The oldest baby boomers are turning 75 this year, and so on. So my point is, some of the things that the One Ride covers, if you will, were issues long-standing, but the numbers may have been low in demand. That is rapidly changing, that the demand is steadily rising. And then lastly, I would say, again, that equitable access to healthcare and other services in the community, and the disparities that COVID has revealed, transportation is a key component. So I think here there are overlapping priorities and the pressures of the growing demographics. And lastly, I would say the state has acknowledged that by the end of this decade, 1 in 4 Californians are going to be a senior. So that's 25% of the population. So again, costs are important. I get that. But the need is rapidly rising, and that these issues we're talking today are going to have an ever-growing impact going forward. Thank you for my time.
You're very welcome. And again, this will be a high priority. Okay, I can't see your name there. Kate, go ahead, Kate.
Yes,
Herb, I'm just going to take people who haven't spoken yet, and then I'll come back to you.
Is this any of this part of the master plan for aging? And if not, maybe it's it's a good thing to make an amendment and make it part of that.
Well, that did get money in Measure X also. And so that will be a conversation. There's no point in working in silos, and we won't, that's on a parking lot issue also. I don't know that we're going to address that today, but Ms. Toth, as I will refer to her professionally here, we got her and your group and everybody money both in this and in the master plan on aging. So it's never enough, but it's more than we had. So I'm really, really hopeful on that. Okay, Herb, go ahead. I'm being really good. I saved us a whole bunch of time, but now we're getting close and we'll take every comment, but go ahead, Herb.
Okay,
How about a closing comment?
I'll try to take it off. What I was going to say is I'm going to add to Debbie's or respond to Debbie's comment about Uber users and discounts. The Tri-Valley, I'm the Accessibility Advisory Committee for Livermore, the Wheels Advisory. And we set up with LAFTA a program that gives a $5 discount on Uber rides and Lyft on all the TNCs for the city of Livermore, Dublin, and Pleasanton. So there is an example out there. And if anyone's interested in finding out more about it, I can give you all of this. So there is that way of using, if a person can use Uber, there is a program already set up.
Right. And I think that will be something we can discuss, but right now we're just talking about.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I was just letting her know that there is an example we could look at, I can tell more about.
All right. Thank you. Rashida, is there anything you wanted to close with?
No, thank you very much for your time.
Okay. And again, we'll be talking about next steps in the future. And thank you, Rashida. I'm like Luella. I've known of this problem. I haven't experienced it. But I'm going to be my potty mouth. Debbie's been bitching in my ears for years and years and years about this. So I'm glad that the transit operators were able, even through COVID, to come to, I'm hoping, I know it was a Band-Aid as Debbie puts it, but I think we all agree we don't want it to be a Band-Aid. We want it to be part of the menu. I'm tired of hearing about toolboxes and tools. We're going to put it on the menu is how we're going to go. All right. Oh, I'm 2 minutes ahead of time. Let's go on to Naomi Armenta, who's going to talk to us about, begin a conversation on the overview of organizational structures. And are you on? I'm not seeing where you are.
Oh, I am here.
There you are. I'm sorry, you're at the bottom. I love it when the gold frame comes up. Then I know who's talking. Welcome, Naomi. Thank you. Can you give an introduction of yourself here, please?
Certainly. Thank you. My name is Naomi Armenta. I'm a principal planner with Nelson Nygaard Consulting, and I'm the project manager for our work with CCTA on the implementation of the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan. I have also been womaning the slides for this meeting. So,
well, thank you, Naomi.
If you had any complaints about how they've gone, that's been my boo-boo. No. So anyways, but carrying on, we've had a really great broad discussion already today about accessible transportation and what we want to do in the county. And this really carries on that topic as we begin to look at our organizational structures. So first of all, as we know, our goal from the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan is to create a coordinated entity. And that's one of the goals also of this task force. And what do we mean by that? Well, as Richard mentioned earlier, we probably mean some sort of mobility management center, or definitely a mobility management function, because the things that we've been discussing today would be improved by that function. So we're going to talk a little bit about CTSAs, or Consolidated Transportation Service Agencies. We're going to show some examples of mobility management centers. And what we are looking for from you, and we've already gotten a lot of great input, are what are the research questions we should be focusing on for our next steps in this process for this committee to consider, or I know a subcommittee's been brought up, but there's a lot of different directions we could go. So that's what we are hoping to get from you today. So to start off, what is a Consolidated Transportation Service Agency, or a CTSA? The designation is incorporated in the California Transportation Development Act, or TDA, to promote service coordination. This actually was legislated in 1976. And in the Bay Area, the MTC designates an agency as a CTSA. In our plan, Appendix D3 lists the MTC process. I pulled it up on screen, but it's really fuzzy, but we will definitely delve more into it. It's not a very, I don't want to say it's not a very prescriptive process, but it is clearly laid out and there are steps that we would need to address. The designee can be an existing agency, a new agency, such as a joint powers authority, or a nonprofit organization. It can be designated county-wide or by a smaller area, such as a planning area. Although the current Bay Area Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan, also known as the Coordinated Plan, focuses on a county level. And that plan, the current plan was adopted in 2018, and we're working on the updated plan right now. And so why would an agency or an organization want to be designated as a CTSA? Oh, I should also note that the designation is not required to precede any mobility management efforts. And in fact, setting up some mobility management efforts would probably help make the case to gain the designation. So why is the designation helpful? It gives an organization access to some funding, such as preferential access to 5310. It allows an organization to work with CALACT on procurement and some other sort of formal relationships. It can work with a very flexible structure and allows for a flexible structure in maybe incorporating new organizations or starting new services. As I said, it's very flexible. And it's also, as we say in the word, designated. So when you are looking at, say, the state or a county, you say, well, who is the designated provider of coordinated services for this population? And your CTSA is a good place to start. So there's a certain amount of credibility that goes along with that. So we also wanted to provide some initial examples of mobility management centers. 3 of these were presented at a CALACT conference panel, and they seem to be a very nice blend of different types of agencies. These are all CTSAs. However, a mobility management center, as I just said, does not need to be a CTSA. And there are some other examples that we as a team think are worth looking at outside of California. These 4 agencies are all over the state in Los Angeles, San Diego, San Bernardino, and Solano. And as you can see, one is a nonprofit, one is a transit agency, there's a Solano Transportation Authority is also one, our neighbors to the north. I thought that Access was a nonprofit, but the best descriptions that I could find of it were local public entity. So make of that what you will. And these are just an excerpt of the different types of programs that all of these centers and organizations offer. There's actually quite a bit more, but I couldn't fit them on. And I would want to be able to dig in to do some more research to really give you a comprehensive list. And they all have a real mix of funding. When you look at them, they have 5310. Many of them have some sort of local sales tax funding, different grants. They get a certain amount of payments sometimes for some of their services that they offer to different community partners. So it's just a really wide range of a mix of funding. So as I said, one of the things we are looking for from you, when I stop sharing in a second, is what are the things that we want to research further. Some of the first thoughts that we have down are origin story, a full list of programs, and also what are the programs that they focus on, because different organizations are emphasizing and highlighting different programs. For instance, Access LA, a lot of their work is through their paratransit, their ADA paratransit, whereas FACT in San Diego is very much not that. They really focus a lot on a broad brokerage of different transportation service providers. And also, what is the level of coordination that they've been able to achieve within their county with all of the providers? And what are the barriers? Because there have been some not 100% happy stories and happy endings when we look at CTSAs in the state. And so we really want to know going in, what are the potential pitfalls and how can we avoid them? So that's just a sort of a starter for us. I'm going to stop sharing, but I can pull this back up if we need it.
Thank you. And to begin the conversation, and thank you for that. What I'm understanding, and many of you may already know, but that having this CTSA designation would be helpful as we move forward. Am I correct in that understanding impression?
Well, we do actually have an expert. Oh, my internet connection may be unstable on the phone. Drennan Shelton from the MTC is here and expressed a willingness to be called on.
Well, because that's my next question as we have this conversation is, how long does it take to set up?
Right. Drennan, are you on? Can you speak to anything?
Sure. Hi.
Hi. So the question is, it appears that we would benefit from having a CTSA designation, whatever organizational structure, it would benefit to be a CTSA designated entity. Am I correct in that? Okay. And how long does it take to set one up?
It doesn't take, there's no set time. The time frame involved in getting the designation has to do with sending letters out, having the Board of Supervisors approve a designation, the paratransit coordinating councils, and in your case, there's only one, and then all of the transit agencies.
Okay.
So we would give them a time frame to study the issue, and then,
like a 6-month process if we got all that going. Okay, that's what because I'm trying to figure out as we move forward, when we should do that. So thank you. And I didn't mean, is there anything else you wanted to add before I open it up to our members?
Yes, there is a 5310 call for projects opening up very soon. And there's about $1.5 million on the line for Contra Costa alone. So as you saw, all of those CTSAs receive 5310 funding. And, it's a good opportunity to set priorities for the county. So I would
time frame on that, because if we're not there yet, I don't think we can apply. So
right. I would say the CTSA doesn't have to apply, but if you're moving in this direction, then you would want a coordinated process for that call for project. So I think there's a lot on the line, and you should probably consider this as soon as possible.
Okay, well, we'll be asking Mr. Engel and Mr. Cunningham to have that on their list. Okay, John, you had your hand up. I'm going to go to you before Debbie, and then I'm going to go to Peter, and then I'll go to Debbie. Or John, where'd you go?
I'm right here. I lowered my hand, so it moved me around. They like to keep us on our toes.
Okay, Peter, did you want to comment from a staff perspective before I go to?
Just a real quick question for Drennan. Because we're trying to establish this coordinated entity, and that may take a little bit to get all that put together from a legal perspective. Can an agency get the designation and then have that designation turned over to somebody else at any point, or once you're designated is?
No, each designation comes with its own time frame, and if the county is in agreement that this is the direction you want to go, then the designation time frame can be shorter, or there can be a redesignation. It's a flexible process.
Right. I think what he's thinking is if we, I'm supposing, Peter, if we made it our Contra Costa Transportation Authority that could get in there and apply, but then as we got this more refined and CCTA was a CSTA, then can they transfer that designation to that new entity, or does the new entity have to apply?
A new entity would have to apply, but it would be a very quick turnaround.
Gotcha. Because everybody's coordinated.
Yes.
Okay. Peter, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And now, John, you do have your hand up. Debbie's waiting.
I was too proactive in lowering my hand before. I just wanted to jump in. One of the reasons why you haven't seen widespread deployment of the CTSA mechanism in the state, and even more limited, these successful models that we can hold up, is that there isn't designated funding for this, for the CTSAs. And this is, according to CALACT, which is a California Association of Coordinated Transportation, I think is what it stands for. That's their own assessment, that, the legislature, when they created this mechanism, they sort of took a middle ground, and they didn't go far enough, basically, because there is no.
It's a good idea, but you figure out how to pay for it.
There is no dedicated funding. In fact, some of the funding that they're available for is in competition with the transit operators. It's funding that the transit operators are eligible for. So you can see how that might pan out if there's competition amongst, large existing agencies, and these small agencies popping up and they want to claim some of this money. That's not going to pan out too well. I bring this up not to point out a negative, actually the opposite. It ties into the things that we've discussed previously, and that we need to go out for more money. We would like to have, exactly.
I think it could be an entity on paper so that we get the designation so that we can go out. Debbie, I'm going to ask you to be patient once again. Debbie, you go, and then Diane.
I'll be patient. Let Supervisor Burgess go. She hasn't said anything yet.
Okay, go ahead, Diane.
Unmuting myself. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand. I barely ever have to do that. So
yeah, she hasn't had to do that because she chairs the board meeting. She didn't have to raise her hand.
Where's the raise your hand? It was good to see those 4 examples in San Diego, LA, San Bernardino, and Solano. What I'd like to do in part of this exploration is ask them, what would they have done differently? Would they have done another, structure? I'm also curious with those 4, I know with the Bay Area, with us talking about going to Stanford or San Francisco, are they doing something as regional and kind of spread out as what we've been doing? Because looking at all those are, some of them are pretty big, but are they crossing as many agencies as what we're trying to do? And so that would be some of the questions that I'd ask, because what we're doing is ambitious, and if they have learned something, I'd like to learn it from them.
And I think that's good. I think that's like step 2. If we set it up, then what kind of programs and that, but could be getting ahead. Okay, Debbie, patient Debbie. I'm sorry, Diane, did you finish your comments? You're back on mute.
It was a great speech, Diane.
I'm learning how to lower my hand now. Ta-da!
Okay. Debbie, go ahead, please.
Okay. Take a deep breath, everybody. Here I go. I think that it's important to hear what John Cunningham was saying. There are things to be learned, as Supervisor Burgess pointed out, and I think that we should absolutely learn them. But we also have to keep it in the context of the fact that these are not funded and they're set up currently to compete with transit agencies for funding. So hopefully with legislation that is passed that funds the development of CTSAs, we're not in this situation where we're competing for funding. Having said that, I think it's very dangerous to designate an entity and not have some shared principles and values going into that first. Because if you say, oh, okay, CCTA, this transportation authority should be the CTSA, and we're going to apply for 5310 funding at $1.2 million to launch this thing, and then Carol can no longer get her vehicles for her ARC programs, and I can no longer pay for my rides to and from our adult day healthcare programs and the isolated seniors in Concord who need to go shopping and need door-to-door services.
Okay, we get it. Okay.
So I think there has to be, you can stop waving, I see you.
No, that's him telling me he wants to speak next.
Oh, I thought he was telling me to be quiet. I was like, hold on, I'm not done yet. I think that it's important for all of us to agree on some principles before we proceed. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. I wanted to point out when we were looking at those 4 different entities, they're all different. In LA, the geography is so massive, right? And in Solano County, they got money from one of the Native American nations in their area. So there's just a lot of different possibilities. What's going to be truly the most important thing for us, I think, is having, I don't know if it's a work group, Karen. I don't know how
we're going to talk about that in next steps. Teresa and I met with staff and we've got some concepts and thoughts there. So
okay.
You're absolutely on track. No decisions are being made today. This is an informational item so that we could have this discussion so that staff could benefit from that as we move forward. You put yourself on mute. Does that mean you're finished?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
For now.
All right. Dave Hudson and then Steve Ponte.
First of all, just to stay in the same vein, if there's anybody here that thinks we're not going to be competing for money, let's clear this up right away. You're always competing. It's always there. But the next thing I'd like to look at is, does this, and I'd go back to Drennan, does this have to be by county? I mean, you look, and one of the places that we were stopping that was a major problem that Herb brought up was where we were trying to get to Livermore. So now you're into LAVTA. And I would think it's more of the corridors that you're dealing with. I have no problem even stretching it into Solano because we're doing so much with Solano right now as far as what our transit is doing and Jim Sparing's role on the Blue Ribbon Task Force. But does it have to be just one county? It's who can service is what we should be looking at, and then go after that money as a combined interest. One personal opinion.
And I'm going to remark that I think we have to start a little bit smaller and then move out a little bit larger. But I get your question, Dave. And maybe that's a question for Drennan. If Drennan, if a CSTA is set up with 5 entities and does stuff, and now they want to add 2 more, does that become a new entity that has to reapply, or can they bring those 2 entities in?
You can bring more entities in. There's no nothing, there's no limit on who you coordinate with.
Okay.
And just from a regional perspective, 9 CTSAs is a lot easier to deal with than an entire region, because we can't get the region to coordinate on much.
Okay, that's good to know. So as we move forward, if we want to set up a CSTA, we'll do, I think what Debbie was suggesting, we have to get a set of principles and how it's going to be and where it's going to be and all that. So, we're just gathering information. Okay, Carol, your hand is up, and then Zenat. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Carol McCrary, go ahead.
Hi, I didn't want to let Drennan's comment about applying now for 5310 funds because it's opening up after the first of the year. And so Drennan, I wanted to clarify that we don't have to have a CTSA designation in order to apply for coordinating funds or mobility management funds. I mean, could this group be considered a coordinated group to apply for those funds to help us get there?
Yes, you could. And I would really encourage you to do so.
And Drennan, that's opening up after the first of the year. How long is it? A 30-day time frame?
No word from Caltrans that's official, but I hear it's probably going to be a 2-month window to apply.
Okay, so okay, 60 days. Thank you. Zinat. Hi.
Hi. Hello, my name is Zinat Hassan. I'm a staff attorney at Disability Rights California. We are a statewide nonprofit, and we are the entity designated under federal law to protect and advance the rights of people with disabilities in California. I want to thank this task force for its work on increasing access in public transportation. And I want to urge the task force to use the coordinating entity as an opportunity to model what an entity structured around accessibility could look like and what it can achieve. Specifically, I want to encourage this group to explore the creation of a new nonprofit entity. If the coordinating entity ends up being a reorganization of existing bodies who have failed to produce an accessible transportation system so far, it's unlikely that the new entity will produce different results. We can maximize accessibility in public transportation by embracing the principle that those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, and the motto of the disability rights movement, nothing about us without us. And we can operationalize those principles by creating a new nonprofit whose sole focus is making public transportation accessible to disabled riders. That nonprofit's board can and should be made up of many riders, not just a few, with a wide variety of different types of disabilities who have real power to determine how that entity operates. Those are the people who know best what needs to be fixed and how to fix it. Anything short of that is unlikely to produce new results. Thank you for your time.
And actually, Zinat, I've been thinking of a new nonprofit, but the reason I asked about if we could form it earlier under another auspice and transfer it was in order to access those funds sooner rather than later, because we're not going to be able to get a nonprofit set up in the next 60 days. And so that's where I was coming from. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Jackie, did we have any members of the public who've been waiting patiently to talk?
Not that I am seeing on here.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to bring that discussion to an end, and then Teresa and I are going to try and encapsulate what we've accomplished and give some direction to staff. So Teresa, where are you? You're somewhere. There you are. Okay, unmute yourself, please. When Teresa and I met with Peter and John and Tim Hale, we were talking about all the work that needs to be done. And while last month we thought that we should meet on the third Thursday of the month, with the holidays coming up and everything, and the assignments we think we Teresa and I, but we want your input to give to staff, we thought we should meet every other month, but that our next meeting wouldn't be till February because December is busy, as I said, and January for a lot of us in elected office, that's a transitional month and things are in flux. And so, and I'm one who wants to give staff an appropriate deadline, but hear back from them so that we don't have to extend it. So we're looking at our next meeting being in February. Can I get thumbs up or thumbs down if that seems appropriate? Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay. So what I'm hearing, although by that time the window will have probably closed for applying for these funds. And Drennan, you're still on. Does this happen every year or every other year, or is this a once in a lifetime opportunity? I'm sure it's not.
It's every 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so if we miss 2022, it's unlikely there'll be another opportunity in 2024. All right. How does the committee feel about this? That if John and Peter, working with whoever they think, can come up with what that would look like in order to only apply for funds, not, that we're solving all the world problems, but that we want to set up an entity, and they can decide if it's through one of the CBOs out there, one of the transit agencies, if it's CCTA to begin with. I'm calling this a holding pattern agency. They're not going to be the ones designated in the end, but they're just there in order to get an application in, not only to become like you said, you don't have to be a CSTA to apply for this funding, but I'm assuming, well, I'll leave that to John and Peter. My thought being, Teresa, if they did this and came back to us in mid-December, and maybe 2 or 3 members of this committee, we'd have a short, Zoom, yay or nay, to give the heads up to move forward. And I see Debbie's hands raised.
And Luella.
And who?
Luella.
Oh, Luella, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. We all put different color hands, and then depending on what your background is, you can always see it. Debbie, go ahead.
So I just want to, if the direction that we're heading is that John and Peter are going to make some decisions and somebody gets designated, that there is.
No, they're not making the decisions. They're putting together, they're going to work to give us some options about whether we do it. And that's why I was saying it will be Teresa and me and maybe 2 or 3 members of this group.
Okay, so that would just like cut out the process of we're not going through our values or our guiding principles until February. Is it possible to have a small work group work on that, just so this can kind of be concurrent with that? I'm concerned about the time frame being not until February. I'm concerned with.
We can't get all that work. I don't think, Debbie, that we can honestly get all that work done in order to form the organization. I think that can come after. All we want is a placeholder in line to be able to access this money. What we do with it after that and how it's going to be used and who's going to be in charge of it, I don't think we have to have that right now, is what I'm hearing from Drennan. I just want to get something in there with an application. It's like a paper tiger,
okay.
I guess.
I hear you, and I'm just asking you to be aware that there are nonprofit organizations sitting at this table who all get funding through 5310. And so there should be a coordinated conversation prior to an ask being made by this entity. That's all.
My question to you would be, as Dave Hudson said, well, that's a conversation for this group. Should we not be applying for 5310 as this new entity, knowing that we'll be competing with some of our other friends and partners around this table? I'm asking that question and we'll come back to it. I'd really like some input on that, because I understand what you're saying, Debbie. We don't want to take money from Peter to pay Paul, but if it's the only way we can get money.
I'll answer right now, Karen, to help you out. Yes. I mean, the idea is to get the money to do the best job. And if this gets money and, we turn around and give it to the other people because it does the best job, then that's it. Leaving money on the table and not going after it is the biggest mistake you can make, because somebody else is going to take it.
Well, and we just have to apply by the end of February. There won't be any decision made. Well, I want to hear from others. Luella, go ahead, please.
So the group that I think is most affected are the people that are already funded by TransPAC. And TransPAC, our money is there. It's going to keep the things that are going. And I agree with Dave, though he cut me off. I agree with Dave because I I think we need to go after the money. There is all kinds of business and other entities that start out with the straw companies to just get them going, just to start working out, starting to figure out how to get the financing done, who handles it, where the sources of money are, what the full structure should be, all of which are much bigger discussions than anything we can arrive at the short term in order to get the opportunity to fund this money. I believe that I agree with Dave. I hear what Karen's saying. I appreciate the concerns of how many things could go wrong because of this. Nobody in this room wants anything less than the most perfect result for the ultimate solution to this problem that can be developed by mankind. So just let's go get the seed money we need to progress.
Okay, I'm going to go to Drennan because she probably is in response. And then I'm going to go to two members that haven't spoken, and then I'll come back to Peter. Go ahead, Drennan.
I just wanted to make the point that applying for the funds doesn't automatically result in competition. Historically, Contra Costa has applied as a group. There are 2 cycles in the past where all the agencies came together and sort of looked at the needs and figured out how to apply as a group. And so I think that can be done again as well.
Okay. And maybe that's the way to solve this problem, as opposed to forming this CSTA now, is bringing those groups together. Because I'm assuming, John and Peter, you've worked with those groups in the past to make those kind of applications. Okay, got it. Okay. So thank you, Drennan. That's very, very helpful. Nicole, go ahead.
Hey, everybody. I really feel like part of what we're trying to address is transportation for those who experience a disability. And in that disability community, there's a really strong saying of nothing about us without us. And that really strikes me what Debbie's saying. I don't hear Debbie saying we should leave money on the table. I hear her saying that we are more powerful when we come together to address solutions and are asking for additional communication. And for those folks who have been doing some of this work for many years, don't put a nonprofit who's been robbing Peter to pay Paul for many years against another one. I just hear asking for conversation. And while I know the holidays are here and time is tight, I really want to support that call that I think we can do both at the same time. I think we can pursue that avenue and also pull in the people who would be most affected by this for those that they serve.
Well, and Nicole, we're going to do just that because Drennan just gave us the answer. We don't have to form this other group and just get in there. There's already a process that's been set up with nonprofit agencies serving this community. And that was the first I've heard of it. So, and John gave a thumbs up. So that is how we're going to go. And I'm going to take Carol's input and then, hear from John and Peter how we can do that so that we don't miss out on this, but with the input of everybody who's been included in the past in making that ask. Carol, go ahead.
I use 5310 funds to fund vehicles, and I'll be applying this year to get replacement vehicles for some very old, decrepit vehicles that I want to donate. I wanted to clarify with Drennan that mobility management funds are different from vehicle funds in the 5310 process. Am I correct in that?
Not necessarily. Mobility management can be funded from what they call the traditional side and also the expanded side.
Right. Okay. Okay. So as a group, we could include my proposal with the mobility management proposal for seed money for our purposes, and anything Debbie wants to get and anything any other local nonprofit wants to get in one big application. And that's doable.
Thank you. And Nicole, I'm sorry, did you still have more comment? Oh, okay, your hand's up. Okay. Peter, and then John, I want you to tell us, based on what you've just heard, how soon you can bring that group together. Is the announcement already out that we know, or can you just work on what you've done in the past with bringing those groups together, at least to have the conversation about how we're going to move forward to apply as a group? Peter, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I think we can pull that together pretty fast. There's there's four or five agencies that have received this funding over the last several cycles, and we all talk all the time anyway. And so we can get that together. We'll bring Drennan in. This may be one of the more complex funding programs available to this population. It's operated by it's done by Caltrans. It's a statewide competitive thing. So we just need to strategize on the best way to submit an application. I guarantee there will be no money left on the table. Whether we do one big application or each agency does its own, they're still going to be coordinated. We just want them to be as competitive as possible in order for Contra Costa to get the most funds it can. The funds come based on the urbanized areas. So the Concord urbanized area, the Antioch urbanized, it's very complex, but Drennan's always been real good about helping us get through those complicated things. So I would suspect probably we can try and set up a meeting for the week after Thanksgiving and kind of just get everybody on the same page and see what people are thinking, and we can move forward from there.
Thank you. John, go ahead.
Yeah, we're well positioned to do this. I agree with everything that Peter just said. We actually already started this conversation and concept over the past couple of weeks. So our conversations are melding very well into the direction that this committee is going. So yep, I agree with Peter. We can start right after Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Well, you see, me as a chair wants to get stuff done, but I don't always know how to get that stuff done. So in this conversation, I've now learned, maybe Teresa, did you know about this other group already?
No, but I had faith in John and Peter.
Well, that's how I'm looking at it, and the group.
Yeah, and the group and everybody who's on the call. I do, and I want to thank whoever made sure Drennan was here to be able to help us with this, especially with the timing. And I know Debbie has her hand up, but
oh, I had asked you to speak, and then because you
thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
I just for Loella and for Dave, just so that you guys have a little bit of context. Many of us, Carol included, and many of us nonprofit service providers provide programs and services for frail elders and people with disabilities. And we're forced to start providing transportation because paratransit wasn't meeting the need. And so to say that it's okay to just jump on in and take all the money that we've used to build up systems is a problem. And we've worked it out. I just want to be clear. I feel like that's been worked out. We've done it before, by the way. All of us got together and provided big applications for the mobility management function and for the capital projects function within the 5310 grant process. So we've done it before. I'm glad that that's the direction we're heading and what we're talking about now. I just want to say that we have been forced to change our business models to provide transportation because the system fell short. And so we need to be kept whole in this process, because if we're not, then those services go away. So I just wanted to paint that picture so that you understood that. It's not a like, oh, we can't have competition thing. It's like we need to come together and figure out how we keep everybody whole that's providing services to these folks and move forward. So it's a both and. That's all. Thank you.
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, just one final point I meant to make earlier is these current Debbie's program and Elaine's program, these are programs that also scored, I shouldn't say scored, were very highly recommended in the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan. Volunteer driver programs and shuttle programs. And so we would want to continue funding those. And if we can get those funds to continue through the 5310 program, that's the ideal situation. But I think it'll help with our scoring to have this big coordinated effort that we're doing through this task force, because a lot of the application is based on how are you coordinating with the other entities within your service area. So this will be very helpful.
Well, and I would like to say, and I'm going to speak on behalf of my other electeds, we're at the 50,000 level and you guys are down at the 10,000 level. And so when we hear money's available, we're ready to go for it. And we recognize the issues you were bringing up. And I'm glad, nobody wants to compete against friends. And so I think that's what you were hearing from the electeds and hearing from the providers, knowing that there's already a mechanism that you work on. you know, I think going back to this issue of the organizational structure, we can talk about the CSTA later. I think I jumped the gun when I hear money, and, you know, how do we get, and don't miss the deadline, you know, and that's where that came in. So I believe, Teresa, if you agree with me, the direction on this issue is to have John and Peter continue with what they've done in the past, set up the meeting, hopefully that week after Thanksgiving, and we will leave it all to you to be able to access this, or to decide on how to put an application in, a coordinated application. Does that sound okay with you, Teresa?
That piece of it, yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Then we are also asking staff and Naomi to come back at the February meeting with, based on our conversation of what we might want a CSTA to look like, to give us some ideas on how we go about that, or whether we do, or if that can be an ongoing conversation. Is that, Naomi's shaking her head. She asked for some direction. Am I reading the group appropriately, that we need more information in order to make that, give further direction? Am I reading the group? Nobody's doing anything. Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I guess one of the things that I heard as we were talking about this, and it may be that beginning that in February is fine, but I didn't know if we wanted to form a working group to begin to look at, to Debbie's point about the guiding principles. And so I'm sort of looking to staff on, is that something we want to try and do in January? And then we have that information when we come back for discussion. Or do we want to hold on that?
I think that,
or other members of the, but staff and other members
Yeah.
of the task force.
I think if we had a working group that could help us, you know, bounce ideas off them about the guiding principles, and get a head start on that, I think that'd be great.
Okay, so let's do this. If Peter and John would send out an email to every member of this, and if we have, if you're a member of the public and not an appointed, please, let's make sure that they have your email, because I want to include everybody, not just appointed people. And that you'll get an email saying, we're going to be putting together a work group on this issue. If you are interested, please let us know. As far as the appointees to this, we can't violate the Brown Act. So I can have a whole bunch of people on the public on it, but I can't have more than a majority of those. So let's just say everybody put in for it. Then Peter and John will come back to Teresa and I, and we'll decide on who of the appointees sits on the work group. But knowing how busy we all are, that would be the best of worlds, but I don't know that we'll get there. So again, Peter and John will send out an email shortly, today's Thursday at almost 4 o'clock. They'll send it out within the next 10 business days, inviting people to be on this work group and respond to that. And hopefully it'll just all work out. And then you all will be the appointees. Teresa and I will appoint you in absentia right today, and you can decide on a date to get together. Is that okay with John and Peter? Does that work? Yeah, okay. And then for those of you, I'm hoping that you all got the notice of this meeting. So that means that we already have your email. So they'll just use the same. But if you found out about this meeting through another source, please make sure to contact them. Probably Peter's easiest to navigate for the staff website. John and I and Diane and Teresa are on the county, and it's like, you know, you got to punch too many buttons. So is that okay with everybody there? Okay. And so then the other direction was that John and Peter are going to, write a letter to those trade organizations.
Caltransit and CalAct.
Yes, thank you. Asking them to put the issue of the one seat concept on their legislative platforms, and that, you know, we just need it there. We're willing to do the heavy work, load, lift, whatever we call it. And my next question for comment, and Teresa, I want to urge both WestCat and East Bay Paratransit to become part of this pilot the next year. And I'm asking that question without actually, Rashida, is there room to include more? It sounds like you had already invited East Bay Paratransit.
WestCat is included.
They are. I just want them, I want to find out why they're not referring more people, because there is an inequity there. If West County isn't getting, as you know, when you got Tri-Delta and County Connection almost getting the whole pot, or, you know, the requests, I want to see how we can expand that. So I'm trying to think of how we can reach out, perhaps right after the first of the year, to those two organizations, not only to get East Bay Paratransit to participate, but then to up WestCat. And I'm open to suggestions by any of you out there as to how we do that. Rita, you've got your hand raised.
I believe WestCat covers a much smaller area than County Connection.
I understand, but
yeah,
what's,
I mean,
they've got to have people that they're serving. I mean, it's obviously that a percentage of their service riders either don't know about this or aren't participating, and could be. That's what I'm trying to get at. Why are their riders not participating in this? And I'm open, if you know the answer to that, maybe Rob does. Rob's got his hand up.
Could I mean, I'm the assistant general manager at WestCat, so I can probably answer that in part. All of our eligible riders who are making trips outside our service area into Central Contra Costa or other areas use this service. All of our riders who make that trip use this service. It's the issue is that most of our connections are with East Bay Paratransit.
I see. So your population would participate higher if we got East Bay Paratransit on board.
Yes. So every single rider who goes into Martinez uses this service from our service area.
Okay.
So our numbers are our numbers because that's how many people use the service.
All right. Thank you for that information. John?
Yeah, to answer the question on East Bay Paratransit, they provide service on behalf of AC Transit and BART. I think at this point, I think we need to go through our representatives on the AC Transit and the BART board. The previous BART board member on the previous iteration of this committee, she was very committed to improving accessible transit. And then I think whoever our, I don't know the composition of the AC Transit board, as I think we do need to approach them to put pressure on their contract or to influence them to engage much more completely.
Okay, so we're going to do that. And John, you and Peter, let's put a conference call together with Teresa and me to figure out how we're going to approach and who we're going to approach. Does that work, Teresa? Okay.
Yes.
Let's do that so that we are moving forward, because I heard Jeannie say they're taking theirs up on December 15th. And Rob, are you going to be extending your participation for the next year?
Yes, we need to agendize it, but yes, we definitely.
Okay, so we've got all the, and I saw there was another one that had a W, but I'll leave that to the group of you to figure that out. But we've got those. So is that okay, John? I heard a yes, and Debbie was clapping her hands, so I guess we're okay. Rob, did you want to say anything else? Your hand's still up.
Sorry, no, I'm just not used to it.
I know, that's okay. Jita, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Did you have a comment? Jita Baramipur?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hi, thank you. This is Gita Baramipur. I'm with Alcohol and at the Drugs Advisory Board. And I'm so happy to be here to learn from you. Honorable Supervisor. And the question that I have is, what is the fiscal year 2021 and 22 recommended budget?
For what? For this one seat program?
Yes, for the
Well,
transportation. Yes.
I'm getting that they've been funding it themselves based on Rashida's presentation, and they're sharing costs based on how many people. So I think it's out of their general fund, and they're doing that. What I think this group is hoping to do is to augment that, and what that has to be a conversation down the road, to strengthen that pilot this next year so that we can show results and outcomes that will move our legislature to putting this in as a funded item. So we, I think, Rashida, you're still here. I think you had expenses of over 86,000, and I don't know if it's a portion of that or additional was like 40 something that had not been. So I guess we could say it was $125,000 budgeted item just out of CCTA, correct? And Jeannie, I don't know if you have numbers at your fingertips.
I'm not at my fingertips. Steve, do you know by chance?
Pretty much, Celeste, for this fiscal year, we've been doing about 8,000 to 10,000 a month.
So I'm just going to round it up to 100 or more than that. No, but if you're doing 10 a month, that's 120,000. And your numbers were the same. CCTA, I think, was 49 and you were 48. So,
right, we're very close. Yeah.
So doing my ad, that's about $250,000, Gita.
Thank you so
and Rob, I didn't even ask you, but I'm assuming, let's just call it a $300,000 program for now.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Peter, go ahead.
I guess I just wanted to mention, as we're looking for next steps, based on the discussion today, but I'll, look for your direction on this, is I was hoping that John and I could sit down with the transit operators and just kind of take a little bit deeper dive into this one seat ride and where kind of because we're looking at this Measure X money and want to get it out the door, and maybe this is some good low-hanging fruit.
I just didn't want to, there's so much there, but please go ahead.
Well, we may not have it all by February, but at least we can get the discussion started and start to make some progress in that direction.
Great. And I would hope that based on John, Peter, Teresa, and my conversation in the next few weeks, that we would be able to meet or decide the action to put the pressure on to get East Bay Paratransit in, and that we'd have some sort of answer by that February meeting. That would be my goal. Rashida, please.
I just wanted to mention regarding the Measure X funding. It was important for us to start wrapping our minds around, with ridership growth and just the growth in the one seat itself, that when we started trying to put together what the budget was going to be in our ask, in our official ask, which we have to do for the Measure X funding, it did not include East Bay Paratransit. So the monies that we had originally had preliminary discussions about did not include that. And if they do come on board, anytime
we'll have to increase it.
Exactly.
And that's fine, because we as the board, and I know Diane had to leave, we tried to assign certain programs to departments to help speed up. And John, did this go to DCD or to EHSD? I can't remember.
It was DCD.
Okay, good answer. So because of that, we have, there'll be flexibility is what I want to say, Rashida, in order to do that. I'm assuming your ask wasn't 1.4 million. And so therefore, there will be money to get out in the first or second quarter 2022. I'd like it out sooner rather than later, but I'm glad that means John's in charge of it, and we'll make sure that you guys get the money you need to have a very successful pilot. Right, Teresa? Yes, yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I went 4 minutes over, but that's okay. My next Zoom is with Tim Hale, and I'm sure he's monitoring this in the background. He's the executive director of CCTA. Jackie, thank you. I know you are keeping track and doing a summary. I'm not looking for motion, detail, just, we can have bullet points and assignments. That's what I'm hoping for that. Before we adjourn, is there anyone else who wishes to make a final comment?
I did want to clarify really quick, Karen. The next meeting for the ATSP task force will be February 17th at 2 p.m., correct?
If that's the third Thursday, yes.
Correct. Okay.
Wonderful.
And then moving forward, are we agreeing to do bi-monthly? So it would be the third.
We may put meetings in between, but I got sort of a heads up because there's going to have to be work done. And 30 days is often, especially getting agendas out. So I think every other month, unless I hear from the group, and we can change that. I know you're trying to schedule out for the year, but I think for now we can go with every other month.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. I can just always put to be determined for the next one after February.
Well, Peter had mentioned to Teresa and I and John that there's another group that meets on a third Thursday. And so one of the reasons to do every other was because that group would fit in between every other. So we're going with every other for now, unless
okay, great. Thank you.
Dictate something different. All right, everybody. Thank you again. We won't see each other in this capacity, but hopefully in other capacities till after the holidays. So I wish you all a very happy, safe, better than last year. Keep your fingers crossed. There's no surge, please, no surge, and that eventually. And I wanted to address Myrtle had a question because when we go back to in-person meetings, we will still do a hybrid meeting so that if it's not, if it's difficult or, you've got a multitude of meetings one day and you don't want to have to drive, we will continue to use the Zoom format even when we get back in person. So hopefully that helps everybody else out. All righty. Nice to see you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. Great job.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.